May 1942, Sevastopol, Crimean Peninsula. The ruins of what was once a proud Soviet naval fortress now smoldered under the relentless German bombardment. For 3 days, Lieutenant Lyudmila Pavlichenko had not moved from her position. 3 days without sleep. 3 days watching, waiting, barely breathing. Her Mosin Nagant 7.62mm rifle, with its PE 4x telescope, had become an extension of her body, pressed against her cheek until the cold metal felt like her own skin. Somewhere in the rubble across from her, another sniper waited. A German, one of the Wehrmacht's best. This wasn't her first counter-sniper duel. By May 1942, Pavlichenko had already eliminated 35 enemy snipers. But this one was different. This one was patient, disciplined. Every time she thought she'd found his position, the angle was wrong, the shadow empty. He was hunting her, just as she hunted him. The endurance required was inhuman. 15, sometimes 20 hours maintaining the same position, muscles screaming, bladder bursting, but moving meant death. A glint of scope glass, the subtle shift of fabric. One mistake, and it would be over. Pavlichenko's eyes burned. Her 25-year-old body, already wounded 3 times in combat, ached in ways she'd never imagined back in Kiev University, where just a year ago she'd been studying history, competing on the track team, dreaming of becoming a teacher. Now she was something else entirely. The German army had a name for her: Lady Death. On the 3rd day, as the sun climbed over the devastated cityscape, she saw it, the smallest movement, an adjustment so minute that anyone else would have missed it. Her finger found the trigger. 1 breath, 2. Finally, she would later say, he made 1 move too many. The crack of her rifle echoed across the ruins. Through her scope, she watched the enemy sniper slump forward. Number 36. But even as she allowed herself a moment to breathe, to feel her heart hammering in her chest, Pavlichenko knew the Germans wouldn't stop. They couldn't, because by now they knew exactly who she was and exactly how many of their soldiers she'd killed. And they were terrified. Belayat-Setkov, Ukraine. No one who knew the young Lyudmila Pavlichenko would have predicted she'd become the most feared sniper in history. But perhaps they should have seen the signs. She described herself as a tomboy, unruly in the classroom, fiercely competitive everywhere else. While other girls played with dolls, Lyudmila was outside, racing boys, climbing trees, refusing to be outdone in anything. It wasn't just about winning. It was about proving something deeper, that girls could be just as good as boys, better even. Her father, a St. Petersburg factory worker, and her mother, a teacher, watched their daughter with a mixture of pride and bewilderment. This wasn't how girls were supposed to behave. But Lyudmila didn't care about supposed to. When she was 14, her family moved to Kiev. The bustling city opened new worlds for the ambitious teenager. One day, a neighbor boy returned from a shooting range, boasting about his marksmanship. He went on and on about his scores, his accuracy, his natural talent. Lyudmila listened quietly. Then she made a decision. I set out to show that a girl could do as well, she later recalled. So I practiced a lot. She enrolled in a sharpshooter class, spending hours at the range while other girls her age attended social functions. Her hands learned the weight of a rifle, the gentle squeeze of a trigger, the discipline of controlled breathing. She wasn't just good, she was exceptional. At the range, she earned her Voroshilov sharpshooter badge, a civil decoration that marked her as an elite marksman. She received her marksman's certificate. The neighbor boy stopped boasting. But Lyudmila had no intention of becoming a soldier. Shooting was just a hobby, a way to prove herself. Her real ambition lay elsewhere. She took a job at the Kiev Arsenal factory, working with the very weapons she'd learned to shoot. At night, she attended classes. In 1937, at 21 years old, Lyudmila enrolled in Kiev University. Her passion was history. Her dream was to become a teacher, to spend her life in classrooms and libraries, shaping young minds with stories of the past. At university, she thrived. She competed on the track team as a sprinter and pole vaulter, her competitive nature finding new outlets. And to keep her shooting skills sharp, she took courses at a sniper school. Just for fun. Just to stay practiced. By June 1941, Lyudmila Pavlichenko was in her 4th year of study, preparing for final examinations, planning her future as an educator. Then everything changed. June 22, 1941, Kiev, Soviet Union. Lyudmila awoke to the sound of distant explosions. At first, she thought it was thunder. Then came the air raid sirens. Operation Barbarossa had begun. Hitler had unleashed over 3 million troops across the Soviet border in the largest invasion in military history. The Wehrmacht was advancing on multiple fronts, and Kiev stood straight in their path. The university erupted in chaos. Students rushed through the halls, some panicking, others already talking about enlisting. Lyudmila sat in her dormitory room, listening to Stalin's radio address calling all Soviet citizens to defend the motherland. She looked at her history textbooks, at the notes for her upcoming exams, at the life she had carefully built. Then she stood up and walked to the recruiting office. The office in Odessa was packed with young men eager to fight. When Lyudmila pushed her way to the front, the registrars barely looked at her. "We need nurses," one said dismissively. "You can apply for medical training." "I'm not here to be a nurse," Lyudmila replied. "I'm here to fight." The registrars exchanged glances. A woman, wanting to join the infantry. They'd heard this before from patriotic girls who had no idea what combat actually meant. "Do you know how to shoot?" one asked, his tone making clear he already knew the answer. "Yes." "Have you ever even held a rifle?" Lyudmila pursued her Voroshilov sharpshooter badge and marksman certificate. The room went quiet. The registrars studied the documents, then looked at her with new eyes. But skepticism remained. A badge was just paper. The front line was hell. "Anyone can earn a badge at a peaceful range," one registrar said. "Combat is different." They sent her to a Soviet-defended hill outside the city where a Red Army unit was holding position against Romanian forces, allies of the Germans. The unit commander handed her a Mosin Nagant rifle and pointed toward the enemy line. "There," he said. "2 Romanian collaborators. Show us what you can do." Lyudmila checked the rifle, feeling its familiar weight. She found her position, settled her breathing, and looked through the iron sights. 200 meters. She could see them clearly. 2 soldiers moving between positions, thinking they were safe. She squeezed the trigger. The first soldier dropped. The second turned confused. She fired again. He fell. The Soviet soldiers around her stared in stunned silence. "When I picked off the 2, Pavlichenko later said, I was accepted." She didn't count those kills in her official tally. "They were test shots," she explained. Within hours, 24-year-old history student Lyudmila Pavlichenko was officially enlisted in the Red Army's 25th Chapayev Rifle Division as a sniper. The division was named after Vasily Chapayev, the legendary Red Army commander, a man who'd become a symbol of Soviet military prowess. Now, Lyudmila would become one, too. She became one of 2,000 female Soviet snipers to serve in the war. Later she would learn that only 500 of them would survive. As she packed her few belongings and prepared to move to the front, Lyudmila thought about her professors at Kiev University, about the classroom she had planned to teach, about the quiet life of a historian. "I knew that my task was to shoot human beings," she later said. "In theory, that was fine, but I knew that the real thing would be completely different." August 1941. Somewhere near Belyayevka, outside Odessa. Lyudmila's first day on the battlefield began with the smell. Cordite. Burning wood. Something else. Something organic and terrible that she would later recognize as death itself. She crawled into position on a small ridge overlooking a ravine. Her Mosin Nagant, now fitted with a PE 4x telescope, felt heavier than it ever had at the range. The scope magnified not just the enemy, but the reality of what she was about to do. Through the lens, she could see German soldiers moving through the ruins of a village. They were people. Living, breathing human beings. Not paper targets, not clay pigeons. Men with families, with lives, with futures. Her finger rested on the trigger. She couldn't move it. In theory, that was fine, she told herself days ago. But theory and practice were separated by an impossible distance. At the shooting range, hitting a target brought satisfaction, applause, a sense of achievement. Here, hitting a target meant ending a life. Minutes passed. Her unit needed her. The enemy was advancing, but her body refused to obey. Then a young Russian soldier crawled up beside her, setting up his own position. He was maybe 19, with a boyish face that still held traces of childhood. He gave her a quick nod, a small smile, the kind of casual gestures soldiers make when they're trying to pretend they're not terrified. The crack of a rifle split the air. The boy's head snapped back. Blood sprayed across Lyudmila's face. His body slumped against her, still warm, his eyes already empty. One moment he'd been alive, smiling. The next he was gone. He was such a nice, happy boy, Pavlichenko would later recall, her voice distant. And he was killed just next to me. Something broke inside her, or perhaps something crystallized. The paralysis shattered. After that, nothing could stop me. Lyudmila wiped the blood from her face with her sleeve. She adjusted her scope, scanning the enemy line for the sniper who'd killed the boy. There, a slight movement in a ruined building, the faint shadow of a rifle barrel. She didn't hesitate this time. The German sniper fell. Later that day, she spotted 2 German scouts attempting to reconnoiter the area, moving carefully through the debris. They thought they were being careful. They weren't careful enough. 2 shots. 2 kills. Her first official kills. Numbers 1 and 2. When she returned to her unit that evening, Lyudmila Pavlichenko was no longer the university student who'd walked onto the battlefield that morning. The girl who'd wanted to be a teacher had met something darker, something necessary. War had a way of burning away who you used to be. That night, she cleaned her rifle in silence while other soldiers talked and joked, trying to maintain their humanity. She thought about the young Russian boy, about his smile, about how quickly life could end. She thought about the German sniper, about the 2 scouts, about the fact that she'd ended 3 lives in a single day. She waited for guilt to arrive, for horror, for regret. Instead, she felt only a cold, clear purpose. I knew that the real thing would be completely different, she'd said. She'd been right. The real thing was survival. Theirs or yours. Lyudmila Pavlichenko chose yours. Over the next 2.5 months at the siege of Odessa, she would choose it 187 times. August through October 1941. Odessa, Soviet Union. The Black Sea port of Odessa became a killing field. Romanian and German forces surrounded the city, determined to crush Soviet resistance and secure the vital harbor. Inside the city, Soviet defenders dug in for what everyone knew would be a brutal siege. Lyudmila Pavlichenko found her rhythm in the chaos. Every morning before dawn, she would move to a new position. Snipers who stayed in one place died quickly. The rubble-strewn streets and bombed-out buildings of Odessa provided endless vantage points. A shattered third-floor apartment here, a collapsed warehouse there, sometimes just a pile of debris that offered a clear sightline. She learned to read the battlefield like a language. The way soldiers moved revealed their experience. Veterans kept low, moved in irregular patterns, used cover effectively. Officers stood straighter, consulted maps, gathered subordinates around them. Enemy snipers betrayed themselves with the smallest mistakes. A scope's reflection, a silhouette held too long, the subtle movement of a barrel adjusting aim. She watched the enemy's daily routines, memorized their patrol patterns, identified their weak moments. Dawn and dusk were prime hunting hours, when long shadows and changing light made depth perception difficult. Mealtimes brought carelessness. Shift changes created confusion. She became patient in ways she'd never imagined. Sometimes she would hold a position for 8, 10, 12 hours waiting for a single shot. Her body learned to ignore hunger, thirst, the desperate need to move. She urinated where she lay rather than abandon a position. She became stone. The kills accumulated steadily. 5, 10, 20, 50. Her rifle became an extension of her will. She knew exactly how wind affected the bullet at different distances. She understood how temperature changed the rifle's performance. she could compensate for a target's movement, leading them just enough that the bullet and the soldier arrived at the same point in space and time. After each kill, she would mark it in her small notebook. A tick mark. Nothing more. The German army kept meticulous records of their casualties. So would she. By September, her reputation within the 25th Rifle Division had grown. Other soldiers requested her by name for difficult missions. When an enemy machine gun nest pinned down in advance, they called for Pavlichenko. When officers needed enemy positions eliminated before an assault, they called for Pavlichenko. She delivered. Every time. Her commanders noticed. In October, after recording 187 confirmed kills in just over 2 months of combat, she was promoted to senior sergeant. But Odessa was dying. Despite fierce Soviet resistance, the overwhelming numerical superiority of Romanian and German forces made the city's fall inevitable. The Wehrmacht advanced block by block, building by building. Soviet casualties mounted. The order came in mid-October. Withdraw. Evacuate what remained to Sevastopol in the Crimean Peninsula, where they would make another stand. As Lyudmila boarded the evacuation ship, she looked back at the burning city. 2.5 months ago, she'd been a student. Now she was a soldier with 187 kills behind her, a senior sergeant, and a reputation that was beginning to spread beyond her own unit. The Germans were learning her name. The ship pushed away from the dock, carrying the survivors towards Sevastopol. Lyudmila cleaned her rifle as the coast disappeared behind them. She knew what waited ahead. Sevastopol would be worse than Odessa. The fighting would be more intense, the casualties more devastating. She was right about that, too. But she couldn't have known that in Sevastopol she would add 257 more kills to her tally. She couldn't have known that the Germans would become so desperate to stop her that they'd resort to bribes and threats. She couldn't have known that her actions would make her one of the most decorated soldiers in Soviet history. All she knew, as the Black Sea stretched endlessly before her, was that she had a job to do, and Lyudmila Pavlichenko was very, very good at her job. October 1941. Sevastopol, Crimean Peninsula. The city is a fortress carved into rock and blood. When Odessa falls to the Romanians, Lyudmila and what remains of her unit withdraw here, to this peninsula jutting into the Black Sea, where Soviet forces dig in for what will become one of the war's most brutal sieges. The Germans outnumber them badly. Artillery screams overhead day and night. The ground trembles with each impact. Bodies pile faster than they can be buried. But Lyudmila Pavlichenko is no longer the frightened girl who froze on her first day. She is a senior sergeant now, with 187 kills behind her. And in Sevastopol, she will become something more. A legend whispered about in German trenches, a name that makes enemy soldiers check the horizon twice. The killing here is relentless. She moves through the ruins like a ghost, her Mosin-Nagant rifle an extension of her body. German scouts, officers barking orders, machine gunners, each one falls to her precision. By May 1942, the War Council of the Southern Red Army cites her for killing 257 enemy soldiers in Sevastopol alone. 257. When they present her with the citation, she is promoted to lieutenant. Her response is immediate. I'll get more. But the most dangerous missions are yet to come. As her reputation grows, so do her assignments. Counter-sniping, the deadliest game of all. Duels with enemy marksmen where a single mistake means death. Where you might hold position for 15, 20 hours without moving, barely breathing, waiting for your opponent to make one error. Lyudmila fights 36 such duels. She wins every single one. One duel stretches across 3 full days, 72 hours of cat and mouse, of patience versus patience, skill versus skill. Neither sniper willing to yield, neither willing to blink. The tension is suffocating. Every shadow could hide death, every sound could be a trap. Finally, on the 3rd day, he moves. Just once. One move too many. Lyudmila's finger tightens on the trigger. The shot cracks across the rubble. Another enemy sniper falls. 36 down. June 1942. Sevastopol. They know her name now. The Germans have been tracking her kills, studying her patterns, whispering about the Soviet woman who never misses. Lyudmila hears it first through the radio loudspeakers, those massive speakers the Wehrmacht uses to broadcast propaganda across no man's land. The voice crackles through the static, speaking Russian with a heavy accent. Lyudmila Pavlichenko. She freezes. Around her, other soldiers glance toward the speakers, then at her. "Come over to us," the voice continues, almost friendly. "We will give you plenty of chocolate and make you a German officer." Chocolate. They're trying to bribe her with chocolate. Laughter ripples through the Soviet positions. Someone makes a joke about German chocolate, but Lyudmila doesn't laugh. She understands what this means. The enemy has put resources into identifying her, learning her name, attempting to turn her. She has become valuable enough to recruit, or valuable enough to destroy. The bribes continue over the following days, promises of food, rank, safety. Each message ignored, each offer met with silence, and, when opportunity permits, another till added to her tally. Then the messages change. The friendly tone vanishes. What replaces it is pure venom. "If we catch you, we will tear you into 309 pieces and scatter them to the winds." 309 pieces. One for each confirmed kill. The soldiers around her tense, waiting for her reaction. Some look worried, others angry. But Lyudmila Pavlichenko simply smiles, a cold, satisfied expression that makes even her comrades uneasy. "They even know my score," she says. The precision of it pleases her. The Germans aren't just aware of her existence, they're keeping count. Every kill she makes, they're recording it. The fear she inspires is real enough that they've issued threats over loudspeakers, broadcasting their desperation to stop her. She has become more than a sniper. She has become a problem the Wehrmacht cannot solve. June 1942. Sevastopol. The mortar round screams in before anyone can shout a warning. The explosion tears through the air, a wall of heat and shrapnel that sends bodies flying. Lyudmila feels the impact before the pain, something hot and sharp slashing across her face. Blood fills her vision. Her ears ring with a high-pitched whine that drowns out everything else. She's been hit before, 3 times already during this war. But this time, when Soviet medics pull her from the rubble, the High Command makes a decision. Lyudmila Pavlichenko is too valuable to lose. She has 309 confirmed kills. She has survived 8 months of the bloodiest fighting in Sevastopol, trained other snipers, won 36 duels with enemy marksmen, and become a symbol, both to her own army and to the Germans who want her dead. Before her wounds fully heal, before she can even think about returning to the front lines, orders come down from Soviet High Command. She is being withdrawn from combat permanently. The war isn't over for her. It's simply changing shape. By late 1942, Lyudmila finds herself standing on foreign soil for the first time in her life. Washington. The capital of the United States of America, a country that has yet to open a second front in Europe, leaving the Red Army to bleed and die alone against the German war machine. Joseph Stalin is desperate. Soviet casualties are catastrophic. German forces are conquering Eastern Europe, pushing deeper into Soviet territory with every passing week. And so he sends Lyudmila. a 25-year-old lieutenant, wounded 4 times, speaking no English, wearing her Soviet uniform with the Order of Lenin pinned to her chest, a uniform stained with the blood of 8 months on the front lines. She becomes the first Soviet citizen welcomed to the White House, where she meets President Franklin Roosevelt and his wife, Eleanor. The First Lady looks at Lyudmila with genuine curiosity, not the patronizing interest of someone examining a curiosity, but the attention of one woman recognizing strength in another. Eleanor Roosevelt extends an invitation. Join her on a tour across the United States. Tell Americans what it means to be a woman in combat. Lyudmila accepts. What follows is a different kind of warfare, one she hasn't trained for.
Her. Instead, they ask about her appearance. The New York Times dubs her the girl sniper. Other newspapers note that she wore no lip rouge or makeup of any kind. One article observes that there isn't much style to her olive green uniform, that her long skirt has a lack of style. A reporter in one city tells her directly, in America, women wear short skirts. Her long skirt makes her look fat. Another asks if women are allowed to wear makeup on the front lines. Lyudmila stares at him, incredulous. There is no rule against it, she says slowly, her translator working to keep up. But who has time to think of her shiny nose when a battle is going on? The questions continue, relentless, degrading, as if the 309 human beings she killed to defend her country mean nothing compared to whether she curls her hair. In New York, Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia presents her with a full-length raccoon coat, beautifully blended skins resplendent in an opera setting, according to the papers. The same papers lament that such a fine garment will likely end up on Russia's bloody steppes. In Boston, a reporter observes that she attacked her 5-course New England breakfast. American food, the article notes, is okay, according to Pavlichenko. She feels the rage building. This uniform she wears, it carries the Order of Lenin. It has been covered with blood in battle, her blood, the blood of her comrades. And these people want to talk about silk underwear. I wear my uniform with honor, she tells Time magazine, her voice sharp enough to cut. It has the Order of Lenin on it. It has been covered with blood in battle. It is plain to see that with American women what is important is whether they wear silk underwear under their uniforms. What the uniform stands for, they have yet to learn. The words land like artillery fire. But something shifts after that. Lyudmila stops trying to satisfy the press's appetite for frivolity. Instead, she finds her voice, the same voice that carried her through Odessa and Sevastopol, that kept her alive through 36 sniper duels. Eleanor Roosevelt stays by her side throughout the tour, and the First Lady's presence emboldens her. By the time they reach Chicago, Lyudmila stands before thousands of Americans and delivers a speech that silences the room. "Gentlemen," she says, her translator's voice echoing through the hall, "I am 25 years old and I have killed 309 fascist occupants by now." She pauses, letting the number sink in. "Don't you think, gentlemen, that you have been hiding behind my back for too long?" The crowd erupts. Applause thunders through the auditorium. Men rise to their feet, roaring their support. The message is clear, undeniable. She has shamed them into action. She continues touring, America, Canada, Great Britain, pressing everywhere for a second Allied front. An American folk singer named Woody Guthrie writes a song about her, Miss Pavlichenko. She speaks about gender equality, about the lack of racial segregation in the Red Army, about how Soviet women fight as equals beside men. "In the Soviet Union, I am looked upon as a citizen, as a fighter, as a soldier for my country. Now I am looked upon a little as a curiosity, a subject for newspaper headlines, for anecdotes." But despite her efforts, despite the speeches and the public pressure, she and Stalin must wait. 2 long years pass before the Allies finally open a second front, Operation Overlord, the invasion of Normandy in June 1944.